And Brian Baker. And that's Johnny Temple, who's going to be moderating for us tonight. And I'm Glenn.
I just want to make sure there's plenty of water. Is there enough water here? I brought my own pen. I'm just going to include it with the other pens.
I'm going to keep mine.
Okay. We're good to go. We're set.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Big thank you to Rough Trade, to Wesley and George and everyone else for running this fabulous record store. And I am Johnny Temple. I'm the publisher of this book. And we've done some great events together with Rough Trade. So let's hear a round of applause for our hosts. So we're going to talk for a little bit up here, and then we're going to allow some time, hopefully, for some questions from the audience, and then there will be a book signing. And so, to kick things off, I will ask Lyle and Brian, when did you first become aware of the gentleman to your left?
Los Angeles, California, 1981.
Maybe 82.
82?
It was at the show. It was 82.
What I know about Glenn is that he will know the answer to all of these questions. I was fuzzy on the details. It was a little organized.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. I remember meeting you at a skate park in LA.
Yeah.
But I could have met you before then too. But what sticks with me, and probably because you're so well known for taking pictures of people at skate parks, maybe that's why in my weird lizard brain that's what stuck. But I liked you. I still do.
That's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I associate it with California, definitely. And it's sort of wrong in a way, or it's right in a way, I don't know. But my most vivid memory of you, and I think we've talked about this before, and you don't remember it, but we were at a show, and you wanted food. And I said, well, I don't have any money, because we didn't have any money ever. And if we did get money, we had to go beg Ian for it. And we didn't want to do that. Because he would always say, what do you want it for? And, then you had to come up with...
I had no recollection of this transactional relationship.
And I don't remember asking.
You had to come up with some
whatsoever.
wacky excuse as to why you needed $3. And I was lamenting this fact, and you said, no, man, we're going to go scam. And I never heard anybody use the word scam before. And you took me, and we went up to people who were selling food, and you tried to get them to give us food. And I don't remember whether it was successful. It was some show in California.
Really?
Yeah. And I remember being in awe of
That's
this.
possible. That's possible, yeah.
I was awed by this, because I figured that, this was the end was there. The final chapter had been written. Ian didn't give me any money. I have no money. I'm hungry.
Have you thought about getting a job? You thought about it.
We had jobs, don't you remember? When we weren't playing, we had jobs at CNN.
Yeah.
I go a quick detour here, because this is something that fascinates me. I went to the same school for a period of time that Brian and Lyle went to, a fairly sort of privileged private school in Washington D.C. That half of Minor Threat went to. The other half went to Wilson, a big public school. But so we were obviously we didn't grow up poor. But I remember in the first band I played in, on a Discord band called Soulside, on our first tour, for every meal we ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because we had no money. How is it that kids how is it that no one had any money?
I think you guys are just trying to do your own thing, right? You're just trying to separate
I-
yourself from that whole family structure. You're doing, you were punk rockers. It's this is the way I remember it. You're not fucking with the family. You're just doing what you got to do. You're making it on your own.
There's I believe, at least in my band, there was no one hiding a trust fund or anything like that. There was just no one had any cash in their wallet.
No, but that was, when you were on tour, you're living on what you make for playing shows.
You're hoping
When we were
to.
in California, we were staying probably at SST on the floor. We were staying
BYO house, I think.
or BYO house, staying with friends, and the money we made playing paid for fuel,
Fuel.
and we had communal. I really don't recall this can I have $5 for hamburgers or shit that he's talking about? But I do know that we had loaves of bread and peanut butter, and because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And there was no real income to speak of, but that of course was totally relevant to the. We were not at home, and the first time around I was 15. I mean, how rad is that? So it was about.
That's amazing.
It
I still see you as the child.
Thank you. Well, my behavior will.
Yeah, I mean,
occasionally-
it was extremely hand to mouth, and it was so hand to mouth that we never got it in our hand, because it was. You have to understand that when the gig was over, they weren't coming to Brian and I and going, "Here's your money." It was Ian going in and getting the money and putting it in his book that he had with rubber bands around it, and then the money would be used presumably to fund our activities, such as they were. But I think that I do also recall having to get equipment and things like strings, and it was always like, what do you need strings for?
Again, I don't know. Maybe I just have this rose-tinted view of a teen out there.
But it is true. I mean,
straight edge product.
We would get, at least for me, I'd get in the van and to go someplace, and I had no money. I mean, I had no cash on me at all.
I just don't think it was that weird.
It didn't seem weird at all. It
It
seemed
doesn't
like,
seem weird
well,
to me.
they'll, it will be provided for. The gods will
And it
smile.
was.
And it was.
I don't
We
know.
didn't
So you're
starve.
saying Ian was the god at this point?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, he was 18, and I was 15. And if anyone, come on, what do you even? Why is this adult man even talking to me? It was of course there's that, and also much like he is now, it's like he got shit done. He's the guy you want to be holding the peanut butter, and procuring the peanut butter. And he did a very good job of it and sold it at a very reasonable price. He built a legacy on peanut butter, and now we're all here. See, so he was right.
All right, so Glenn, how about you? When did you first become aware of Minor Threat?
Well, I do tell the story in the book pretty thoroughly, but I will say their records is what I first heard. And when I first heard the first record, I just played it one time and that was it. And it was in a stack of records that someone gave me, and I didn't really think much about it, to be honest. And then the second record came along, and that just blew my mind, blew the doors off. I thought it was incredible. I related to it totally, and went back and listened to the first record and realized, wow, I fucked up. I missed this. And then I hear it, and then they're coming to California to do a show, and I made it, as I did always, something that's interesting to me, I made it a point to make sure to be there and to meet these guys. And I'd actually already met Ian and Alec and Guy at a Bad Brain show downtown. So we had a connection. I met them, and I was going to New Jersey to visit my dad for my summers, what I did back then. But the night before I left, I saw Minor Threat play at the Barn, which is the first show photographed in this book. And that's when I remember seeing them the first time and meeting them and hanging out and just, doing what kids do when you're at a show.
That's when I met you.
There you go.
That was the Dead Kennedys.
That's
show.
right. Dead
Okay.
Kennedy,
That
Zero
was when,
Boys.
That was when TSOL was going to kill us.
Was it? I didn't know. Why was that?
Well, they wanted you,
It
but
was
then they
me
would have taken me.
specifically, actually.
Yeah, they wanted you specific. What was the reason? I've never heard this story before.
Well, as best I can tell, and of course we're all good friends now, so I'm not worried anymore. Because there was a cartoonist who drew cartoons for Touch and Go, who might have been named Brian Walsby or might not have been, who might have drawn a cartoon that was not really, specifically TSOL friendly, and my name was also Brian. And that's about all it took, I guess.
You're from the East Coast and you have a name Brian.
I was from
and
the
we
East
thought it was
Coast,
you.
which is nowhere near Detroit or Toledo. But no, it was just a mistaken identity kind of situation.
And they were like 7 feet tall.
Well, they still are.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. No, it was
They were
just.
big tough guys and
Yeah,
they
they were
liked to
big
fight.
tough guys.
They were
but it was-
brawlers from
and
Long Beach.
I think that everybody, I guess they were going to come and beat me up or whatever they were going to do. But when you get there, and I'm 5 feet tall, and a little baby, and I think that everyone realized that this was ridiculous. And I think Ian talked to whoever at that point was interested the most in retribution and diffused that as he does. So it's not a thing, but it's really funny because those guys are great and they're actually good friends now. We don't talk about it much though. I just let that one lie down there.
Here's the baby right here with blonde hair. See?
Jesus.
Baby right there.
Right there.
Right here too.
So
You can tell
cute.
he's younger than everyone else,
His
right?
pro-Disney stance.
Yeah, wearing his Mickey Mouse shirt. There you go. He's getting ready to get beaten up by TSOL.
Yeah.
And, Lyle, what do you remember from that barn show?
That incident, definitely, where these very scary large people came through and grabbed Brian at one point, and then I was yelling, "That's not the right Brian! That's not the right Brian!" And then I think Ian came along and dealt with it as he usually did. I remember it being impossibly large as a venue, and I'm trying to explain this to people that, you know, Glenn took photographs that made us look like we were playing in these giant places. And even in my own mind's eye, I see these places being a lot bigger than they actually were. They were teeny tiny little places, but the barn was a big place.
Yeah, that was had this second
Yeah.
deck that I didn't even remember, but I see it in the pictures when we were making
Right.
the book.
Right, and so for me, it was, you know, kind of amazing to suddenly be playing in this what I consider to be a really large place, because most of what we did were in these tiny little places, often with very low ceilings, and that, of course, psychologically, that low ceiling makes everything seem even smaller.
Yeah, it was also it was overwhelming. But what I took from it was that everybody looked really punk, and we didn't really look that. I mean, we were punks, but we didn't have that. There wasn't a UK influence into the way we looked. I think that in DC, it might have already passed. That was kind of the sort of a prerequisite when you got into punk, was that you kind of took that UK subs kind of look, and so. When we got to California, there were like 1,000 people with mohawks and bondage pants, and it was 80 degrees out, and it was just like so incredibly. It was awesome, intimidating, and just in a wild sight for a little kid in a Mickey Mouse shirt. And I remember one thing I'll always remember. It's not even a story. It's just this one dude. It was a guy, and he had 3 mohawks, and he was driving a 1969 Cadillac Coupe de Ville convertible. And the car was kind of fucked up, but it was a Cadillac convertible, and this Tri-Hawk dude was in it, and he was backstage. He's probably friends with somebody, and I was just like staring at him in the car, and I'm just looking at him like, that is so rad. And he goes, "It's a Cadillac," and I still say that. It's a Cadillac. Yeah, good time.
So one of the things I wanted to ask about all three of you, and starting with Glenn, is the violence at punk shows, and specifically minor threat shows. I actually know very little about how much violence there was or wasn't, but when I see live videos of minor threat, it looks chaotic and very violent. And
Very big difference between chaos and violence.
That's true.
I see no fucking violence at shows. Almost never. I have to say. Those fucking stupid movies that came out, that American hardcore piece of shit makes all of our music look bad because they talk about the violence so much. Fuck that. That's just not true. There's a little bit of violence, just like Chuck Dukowski said many years ago. You know, just like the Cowboy Bar down the street. There's always someone who's willing to have a fight. But chaos, yes. That book to me is full of fucking chaos. It was an amazing, chaotic time, especially when this band hit the stage. But violence, of the show, every time I saw Minor Threat, I do not remember one fucking fight. Not even at CBGB.
Well, I want to keep talking to you for a second, but I'm curious because I'd be very surprised if both of them don't remember any violence at Minor Threat shows. But let's stick
But what's
with you.
violence? Is slam dancing violent?
No, punching each other in the face and
Yeah.
blood. And,
Yeah, no, I never saw those shows.
To be honest, Johnny, I was afraid of conflict and big people. And I want to keep harping on the idea that I was the youngest one and the smallest one, but in a sense, like, I was not the guy in the pit, like laying down the law, motherfuckers. Like, I was, against the stage or whatever. And so there was a lot of, I don't recall violence. Like, I see it more like Glenn saw, just this insane chaos, but like, I never got beat up. I don't recall.
there weren't contingents of Nazi skinheads who would show up and terrorize?
Oh my fucking God, no.
I say this based on my own experience
Yeah, that's it.
during the Soul Side,
Right.
and contending members of my band
Yeah,
ending up in the
right.
hospital.
In 1989.
Yeah.
that's-
87 to 89.
Right.
No,
in fact,
it's
a whole different
remember-
world back
It's a
then.
different world.
Yeah, I don't ever remember any blood except myself. I bleed because I would hit my you know.
That's a
hand
self-inflicted
against
wound. That does not
strings.
count. Self-inflicted.
And I remember, but I don't remember any blood. I remember a lot of slam dancing, and I remember being concerned because I was concentrating on playing guitar, and then people would hit me. And at first, actually, in the band, I actually had a mic in front of me, and that lasted about 4 shows. But they hit my teeth so many times that I finally said, we're not doing that anymore. But I remember chaos, and what was interesting, though, is we went into some places where, like San Francisco in the day.
Lyle, chaos.
There you go.
Deals with that?
My hand.
We went into San Francisco, which was, I mean, everybody there was on speed. And the whole thing. But those kids, when we started playing and when we were hanging out with them, they was all very cool. Just never saw it, you know?
I think it was a later time, Johnny, too. I think, people, just like punk rock in the early days, we would go to shows here in New York, there'd be 15 people at a show. When I saw the Bad Brains play on 6th Avenue here in 1981, right? Literally, maybe 20 people were there. And people, all of a sudden there'd be reports on the news. People would be talking about it just like they do now for the internet. It's content, it's something exciting. Let's play up the violence or whatever. And in the scene, there was certainly some fights, and there was things going on, and, there was a lot of chaos. And I definitely saw, hippies getting beaten up when they come to a punk rock show on occasion. But it was, like, at the shows, it didn't really happen that much, but when someone got a picture of it or was a film of it, it would just go viral for back then. And this kind of excited people and brought that contingent to shows. Mm-hmm. And so I think as the 80s went on, and as more knuckleheads would show up at shows, not people who were interested in art and music, but people who kind of just wanted to fight, and they saw that might be a place for that to fit in, that's when that kind of happened. And to be honest, that's kind of when a lot of us started not going to punk shows as much anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
I think so. That story is familiar with a lot of musician friends, is that they just were like, this is bonehead shit, and that's.
And it wasn't part of the scene, was it?
No, but I mean, look, we can't just.
It evolves.
I don't know. I mean, as I'm really thinking about things, I'm trying to think of like isolated incidents, but not what you're talking about, which I totally, I understand. I was alive then too. I just was working, and by that time I was not really playing hardcore shows anymore. But the idea of sort of quasi-militarized, punk as gangster thing was a much more of a product of when you were out there working than when I was. But I remember that some people would try, like I think Ian had gotten a fight in San Francisco one time we were there. Some people were not interested in our particular lifestyle choices.
Yeah,
Felt that they wanted to share their feelings about their own.
I think I had an incident at Penn State University.
I mean, things like, so there was obviously, it wasn't a complete.
But interestingly enough, I think it was one of those things where we would sit there and say, it's worse over there. Like, oh, in Boston they fight, or in San Francisco they fight, or in LA they fight. But then we would go there and it wouldn't happen. But we would hear that. What people have to understand is that, in that era, your source of information was a fanzine or an eyewitness who was usually completely unreliable. So, there was no internet, there was no television, there was no film of any of this stuff. There was no television.
Yeah,
hand cranked,
Yeah.
hand cranked radios.
But farms, yeah. That's why we didn't have food.
There was nothing broadcast to us. We had to seek it out, and the information we got was imperfect, which was actually really great, because the anticipation about a band that you'd never ever seen coming from a place, coming to your town, was palpable. I mean, when you found out that Black Flag was going to come to Washington, D.C., it was like, for weeks you were just on complete, and then you'd see them, and they didn't comport with what you imagined they would be. And I remember when Black Flag came the first time to 930 Club, and I didn't have a cabinet. I didn't have a guitar cabinet. I had a head, no cabinet. And Greg Ginn rolls in with all his crap, and he's got all this stuff. And I said to Ian, maybe you could ask him if I could borrow a cabinet. And he's like, you can ask him. And, and of course I thought Greg was the scariest person I'd ever seen in my life. And he was also, 25 years old or something, talking about an adult, and And of course, I go up to him, and he's the biggest geek in the world. And he's like, "What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? You want to change the impedance on your amp? You want to do this? I'm like, I just need a cabinet, man. You know, that's it." But so I think the impression that you got about other scenes was something that contributed to the idea that there was all this violence going on that you never really saw. So maybe there was, but we didn't see it.
I mean, that's actually totally fascinating to hear, because I remember when the violence seemed to start subsiding at shows, and I always just assumed that the violence was just there till 1991 or whenever, you know, the Nazis stopped showing up. But anyway, nonetheless, it was very chaotic. We can all see that in Minor Threat Live videos. And so, Glenn, I want to hear a little bit
In
about
the pictures, Johnny?
What's that?
Only in the videos, not in the pictures?
How did you station yourself in such a to get these beautiful photographs, and also what cameras were you using when you were shooting Minor Threat?
Well, I think I'd seen enough punk shows at that time. I've been going for a couple years at this point, and I hadn't seen Minor Threat before, but I loved their music so much I knew I was going to have to shoot. Because usually I would see a band before I would go and shoot, and I didn't bring my camera to most shows. I didn't want to be a camera nerd. I didn't want people to see me like that. I just thought it was corny. But on occasion, there was something that just had to be done. And like for Minor Threat show in Los Angeles, and plus the Dead Kennedys were playing that night too, someone I knew, and I was going to photograph them again. It had to be done, right? And I come from a skateboarding background. So, you know, and growing up around the Dogtown guys, you know, it's like I had to in order to be there, I had to be good. If I wasn't good, if I wasn't getting the goods, I couldn't be there, right? And so I really cut my teeth in Dogtown, but really learned how to capture that exact most perfect moment from skateboarding. And then I just brought it to music. And I think that's a big part of what separates my punk rock photos from other people's, because in skateboarding too, skateboarding comes from surfing, and you're talking about beautiful stuff, right? And I grew up on Sports Illustrated and National Geographic and Surfer Magazine, and these are like beautiful magazines in the 70s. So I felt I had to do something beautiful. I had to do this. And then with the action of punk rock, it's like, it's just as predictable as skateboarding in some ways. There's spots where things happen, and you kind of just get there. But at a stage, you know, later on, eventually you learn you want to have the audience in the picture, you want to have the band member in the picture, but you want to get that peak intensity, right? To inspire people the way I'm inspired at the moment. So my skateboarding background, knowing that split second, the right moment, knowing the angle, and being at a gig, you know, it was second nature to me, and that's just how it happened. I think that answers your question, but I mean, you know, and it was just so exciting, and like skateboarding at this point was kind of slowing down for me and for everybody. It was taking one of its, you know, it goes up and down in waves, and to be at a Minor Threat show, I will say this, it's like, also, these guys on stage, they're not the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag, like these guys have both said, you know, we're all around the same age. Brian's a little bit younger, but it's like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys, we kind of looked up to them. Even if they're on a stage, we're looking up to them because they're kind of adults to us. They're 24, 25, we're 19, 20. Big difference. We're still in school, most of us, you know, and living at home, most of us, you know. But Minor Threat, and you know, a friend of mine brought it up to me even back then. It's like, they're really one of us. Now, DC might have had that going on all the time, right? That was the DC scene, I think, was like that. In Los Angeles and New York, it's like, I went to see the Weirdos. They were adults, you know. In New York, you would see, you know, whoever it was, the Mad or the Bad Brains, they're all older than us. Minor Threat was like this. They were us. And it was like, and that even made me feel more, you know, close to them and able to get closer to get those intense photos. And then plus Ian was a skater, you know, and I met Ian and Alec, you know, because of my skateboarding stuff. They knew me because of Skateboarder Magazine, as we've said many times before. And yeah, so I think, you know, that's the answer to that, right?
Yes, that is.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, also the Minor Threat stage situation is a lot different than a Dead Kennedys or Weirdos, because it was not based on some pre-existing like idea of singer, guitar player, bass player. It was this constant swirl of action, and because Ian was a skater in the way he expressed himself, he was always in motion, and that put us in motion. And I remember, keeping moving was, I think it's also a component of our era was people are always coming on stage. So it's about, you develop this kind of dance about evading incoming. And it's comes that even when people aren't coming on the stage, I'll see videos of me in 81 or 82, and I've developed this kind of weird hoppy dance that is from getting out of people's way, and then when they're not, I still did it. It just became a natural, I guess I just found my body motion through that situation.
So I'm just thinking of it now, and Johnny making us describing it, or getting us to that point. If you know these songs and these records, and you see this band playing them, I'm just hoping that the book tells a little bit of that story, because they were fucking amazing. They were really, really great, these guys on stage. I mean, to photograph them was great. It was an honor. It was fun as fuck. It was just so much fun. We had so much fun. And because I was friends with them, I was doing that same dance on stage to stay out of the way, to not be in between the audience and the band members. You stay crouched down. You're out of the way. You don't want, that's the last thing I want someone is to notice me. But it was so much fucking fun. Their shows were so really great, and I've seen a lot of great bands, and I could say that about other bands too. But seriously, putting this book together and being reminded of it, the photographs that you see at CBGB's and the insane chaos there. And by the way, Jamie's here. Jamie, you want to raise your hand? Yeah, he's in the back. Jamie wrote the piece about the Minor Threat show. He was in the band The Mob that helped them get in that day when they were late. I just wanted to give a little hello to him.
That's very kind of you. Thanks.
I mean, I think the interesting thing is I don't once remember Glenn being on the stage. But I know he was behind me a lot of the time. I mean, I know from looking at the pictures he was behind me. But I wanted to say something about Glenn as a photographer. And we were photographed by, obviously, anyone who showed up with a camera could take pictures. And what's fascinating about this whole process, and we talked about this a little bit, but the fact that you didn't shoot that many photographs of us. And when I saw what you had put together, I thought to myself, I didn't say it to you, but I was like, where are all the photographs? And then my wife and I went to see Rage Against the Machine at Madison Square Garden recently, and you were taking pictures. And a lot of other people were taking pictures. And we were in a position where we could watch him down in the pit. And I noticed something immediately that I don't know why I'd never noticed, which was that you spent so much time framing and so little time shooting. And everyone around him, all the other photographers were just... Now, not that they couldn't get good photos. The problem, of course, was they got to weed through all of that stuff, right? In order to find... And you're probably going to end up with 20 shots that basically are the same thing with a slightly different, facial expression. But you... And that was what was interesting, because you were always in the background, but you would always lean in and get the thing, because you knew it was coming. And I didn't realize that until many years later, that you knew when one of us was going to do something, because you knew the music and you watched the flow of it as you did with skating. So that makes a lot of sense. There you go.
Thanks for noticing.
And Glenn, isn't it true that generally across your career you've taken less photographs per live shoot than the average?
Yeah, I mean, when I started
before cell phones.
Yeah. I started shooting skateboarding. I was 13 years old. We had film. There was an expense to it. And again, when you're hanging out with older people that are a lot tougher than you and want to harass you, you're not just shooting pictures all the time. You have to do it to make it count. And that's where I learned from. And not, even when I worked with Skateboarder, eventually they gave me free film after I got my first picture published. But I still had to pay for the processing. As it just wasn't like you just shot digital and you could just shoot all day. I mean, I don't envy the kids who do it now, because they don't have to focus as much as I did. But that may be where some of my intensity comes from, just some of it, right? Is that, you really have to make it count. So yeah, I guess, for this book, I feel like I've told the story 100 times, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. But I literally only took 200 pictures of Minor Threat, period. That's just the total number of pictures there were. And out of that, I mean, that's every single picture. That's every bad one. That's when the flash didn't go off or whatever it was. But out of those 200 pictures, and not every one is an amazing photo, I'll give you that for sure, but there are some amazing photos in there. But out of that 200, 140 of them are fucking in this book. That's a pretty good record. I'm pretty proud of that. And I can't even believe, on top of that, you don't even understand that in some of these shows, the lighting is so poor, like at CBGB's and stuff. I mean, you could look at the video and you could see there is not much light there. And there's no automatic focus, no automatic exposure. I gotta fucking adjust that shit all night long, every shot almost. You know, but again, because of skating, I have an idea of where something's gonna happen, so maybe I pre-focus a little bit, but still, everyone's moving around, and you know, and I think some video did show up of that CB show recently, and yeah, it's total fucking chaos, and I can't even believe I shot those pictures sometimes, particularly because the low light situation, and then you have to focus on people, and the flash helps in some ways because it's very bright and it gives you a good depth of field. Not to photography nerd out at all, but it's I'm pretty surprised that I was able to do that much shit back then, I have to say.
Maybe this is now a good time to talk a little bit about your iconic photograph of Minor Threat sitting on the porch at Discord House. And I'll start by asking these two fellas, why do you think that photograph became so iconic?
Well, first I'd like to say one thing, and that, you know, there's two of us here, and there's two more and a third out there who played in the band, and then there's folks that helped us along the way. But Glen and Glen's photography, make no mistake, it's as much of us as we were. I mean, you guys know the images. I know the images. I mean, most of these images in this book I'd never seen before, in any form, because Glenn selected photographs that he thought were the ones he wanted to present. He made prints. I saw those. We used some of them. Didn't see the rest of them. But those photographs have established our identity as much as a guitar chord did or a drum beat. There's just no question about it. And I think almost any band who had good photography taken of them would say the same thing. That shot, I think, works because there's a lot of counterpoints in that shot. By the time you took the shot, I mean, we were an established hardcore band. I mean, we were an established punk rock band. People knew what we were. And that shot, though, captures this sort of almost, I mean, it seems rustic in some ways. It's, of course, extremely well composed.
Well, it's taken in front of a shack.
Yeah, taken in front of a shack.
And it looks like it could be a picture from 1939.
Yes, right.
And it's also just one of those, that's a beautiful, amazing photograph. It was that right second, that lightning bam, and it's like, it expresses so much. You can see individual personalities in it, the background, which is this kind of beat up old house, but you know that that's the Discord house.
Right.
And that's, I mean...
and even if you don't, you know that somehow we belong there.
Yeah, and it's just one of those incredibly, you know, lucky, amazing things. And then it doesn't help that a lot of people got to see it.
Yeah.
You know, it's, I don't know, it's just, you know, it's almost kind of hard to try to dissect it because it's just that.
When Brian, as you may remember, Brian and I played together in a band called Fake Names.
Fake Names,
and
Epitaph Records. We have 2 albums out. The third one is being written right now.
But when we played in Toronto a couple of months ago, a woman, Monica Sklar,
Right.
handed over a whole academic paper she had written about the photograph.
Yeah.
But backing up a second, when Glenn
That was amazing.
Glenn first started talking to me about, you know, and other people about making this photograph, he told me there's that iconic photo of them sitting on the steps of Discord House, but there's a whole roll of film. Half a roll. But so for those of you who have not looked through the book, I mean, I lost my shit when he told me that. And I'm curious, Glenn, what do you remember? Do you remember that day well? Do you remember anything about the day?
I don't remember it well, but just because it was just friends hanging out, and I think that I was in DC, I think to see the Faith or for some other reason, and we went to a skate ramp earlier in the day, and they were going to hearse that day or something like that, and I just I really liked the idea of the communal house. Like in LA, I didn't really, I mean, BYO had something in SST, you know, a band lived together, but like there was something about, there were all these kids, not 25-year-olds, 19, 20-year-olds, 21 maybe, living in a house in the suburbs, and like they had a house. It was messy, it was nasty at times, but it's like they had their own fucking house, which was like amazing to me, and it was just this communal aspect of it that I just thought was so fucking cool. And there was a photo taken on those steps earlier that I never knew about until years later when they released that single from the demos or whatever. But and that was taken before the time I did, but I had no idea that existed. But I'm there, and I just want to make this what is kind of a beautiful setting. You know, we're across the street from 7-Eleven, where at the time none of us are vegan yet, none of us are even vegetarians, except for maybe Tomas or something, maybe not even then. And you know, it's just in this neighborhood, and it just looked so, it just looked so cool to me, and I just wanted to capture that image and show it to other people and to share it. And that one shot that I picked, that I sent to Jeff Nelson, is the perfect shot. Out of the dozen of them that I shot, to me, it's the one. It's like, Ian's right, the head is just right. You know, I look at a lot of things. You know, I could tell you the same thing about Public Enemy's second album cover. It's the wrong shot. They didn't use the run where the photo where Flavor's head is leaning the right way. But that's because there were more bars in the photo or whatever. That shot of Ian is the one. Did I know it was going to be iconic? Did I think it would mean anything to anybody else? No.
No.
I had no idea.
No.
Yeah. We just made the photo because I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
You know, the beginning of the roll, Ian, photos of Ian in his car. There's, you know, pictures with the dog. There's the end of the roll. I'm back up in New Jersey, and I wanted to finish the roll, so I pretended I dropped my camera off the roof of my dad's building, and I take a picture on the fire escape going down, you know, each floor, and that was it. And then, like, you know, I sent a print maybe to Jeff and Ian just to have, and then it shows up on an EP that's a year or two after the band broke up.
Yeah, and I also think you have to remember that, you know, those are the clothes we're wearing that day.
Yeah.
No one thought they're going to take photographs. Let's dress up.
And
although there is an inexplicable coat wearing by me.
Yeah, Ian, we were talking about that.
No
Why are you
one-
wearing a heavy coat in August?
Well, first of all, I don't think that was my coat. I think that must have been something in Discord House that I just picked up and put on.
But it's only in that one photo.
In that one photo,
Yeah.
right. Which it makes no sense at all, because there's...
You just wanted to look sharp.
Yeah, it doesn't look sharp.
I got lucky. I was wearing my favorite sweatshirt.
Okay.
It was the perfect storm.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I never knew that was your favorite.
That was
That's
my
great. It was a
absolute
cramped
favorite.
sweatshirt.
It was a it's a sweatshirt, but it had cramped silkscreen on the front of it. But it wasn't like merchandise. It was homemade, and I had gotten it from an old girlfriend of mine, and she was a lot more punk than I was, and so it was like you can't really tell because the photo's not exactly the sharpest photo. That, you know, there's like.
Excuse me?
Whoa! I'm talking about the focus.
Uh-oh. Everyone could look at the book. He's wrong. It's very sharp. But go ahead.
Can we see the photo?
Yes, we can.
I want to see if you
Oh,
can.
you know what it is? You weren't wearing your glasses. That's why you thought it was out of focus.
Let me see. If I recall,
You might just be, it might be a little bit far away from the lens. and
I
that's
think
why
it
you
was
didn't
far
see it.
away.
That's all. It's not out of focus, though.
No, that's not. No, that's actually
Okay, thank you.
that's the
Okay,
clearest
thank
focus
you.
I've ever seen.
Okay, there we go.
No, it's because my arm is the.
Oh, the actual one is at the front of the book, is on the title page.
Oh yeah, no, I stand corrected. I mean, just even the quality of this paper alone.
Aren't you glad you didn't pay
There
for
you
this?
go.
Yeah, well, just that the sleeves were held together by safety pins, but you can't really tell because I'm just too far away.
There
And
you
as
go.
you see,
There
I'm
you go. It's
obscuring
not out
the
of focus,
safety
just
pins.
too far away.
I'm obscuring the safety pins right here. Well, this is how we learn. You know, we go back and we talk with the artist.
Well, you were the second most punk. Jeff was the first most punk in the early days, and you were the second most
I
punk
was the second.
in terms of
I
regalia.
was the second most punk. But
That
that was,
definitely wasn't you.
I-
We've had discussions about that.
I tried, but man, I looked like an idiot.
But you were like
Absolutely.
always, but you always had this preppy edge to you, which
Yeah,
and
well,
what was
that-
that about?
that
It's just
was-
because you were the first collegiate in the band?
No,
Prep
yeah, that
edge.
might have been it, but I think it was more that I tried to be punk. I think at one point got bondage pants at one point, and I just
you couldn't sell it.
I looked like
I
couldn't sell it.
It
at
just
all.
didn't work with you. And I was
At
fighting
all.
against glasses, and yet
Yeah.
here I was.
Yeah, Yeah, if I have one abiding memory of playing on stage with Brian Baker, is him pushing the glasses.
Well,
pushing the glasses.
I didn't know that I could just take them off.
Yeah, well,
I just didn't think.
you would have been better off.
Well, I learned that later.
But that's kind of your thing. That's how you're known. It's like DMC when he takes off his glasses, no one recognizes him.
But yeah, so I think what happened is that I just realized that there was no hope in me pulling it off. So I just stopped. And then and then I saw Greg Ginn, and he had button-down shirts on. And I thought, okay, you see, now I feel good, because if he can do that, I can do that. And then I found out a lot about Greg, and I was like, maybe I should have gone back to the bondage pants. But that was later on.
All right, time is kind of flying by here.
Of course, look who you're with. It's Glenn Friedman.
That's right. I'm going to ask one more question to you two, and then maybe we can open it up for questions from the audience. So start thinking about your questions. But one of the things I noticed when looking through the book was just how fucking scary Jeff Nelson looks. And I was flipping through, noticing, here's Lyle smiling, here's Brian smiling, here's Ian smiling, and I was like, and I looked through and I found a picture of Jeff smiling, but it's like the scariest fucking smile. and he was also, I believe, he was a few years older than both of you.
Right.
Was he in fact a scary dude?
No, God no. No, he was funny and smiled all the time. I think that first of all, when he was playing, the gymnastics that man performed as a drummer were unbelievable. I mean, the focus. If you've seen clips of Minor Threat, he's doing so many different things at one time. So he's just laser focused. And I think also he's shy about having his picture taken. When he knows his picture's being taken, he doesn't know what to do. Like many of us, we weren't used to being photographed like that. It just wasn't part of it. But I mean, Jeff laughed all the time.
Oh, he was goofy. I mean,
Yeah,
he was the goofball, definitely. I mean, he had a million inside jokes that he didn't even let us know about. Like, he'd be laughing at stuff, and we'd be like, "What the fuck is going on?"
That's a little scary.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I mean, Jeff is a very eccentric person. But when I say eccentric, I don't mean to shade that to the dark side at all. It's eccentric in the light. Jeff's into a lot of interesting things, and he pursues things with single-mindedness. So he was very intense when he was doing his thing, but when he was just hanging out, he was the goofball. I mean, he once put gum, without saying a word about it, just put gum in your hair, right?
Well, yeah, that was how the gum got in my hair.
Yeah. He was in behind Brian, and had this massive. Jeff had prided himself on taking like 700 pieces of gum in a bag on tour.
Well, Jeff collected bubble gum.
Well, yes, but
he still does.
Yeah, he does. But this was just Bazooka Joe, right? And he would shove these things in his mouth, so his mouth would just get huge. And the way the van was set up was like there was one person in the back line prone, and then there were three. It was like the Apollo spacecraft, if you remember that. There were three guys like this, like against the thing. And so Jeff's in the back, and apropos of nothing, Jeff just takes the wad of gum out of his mouth. Brian's in front of him, and he just puts it in Brian's hair.
Yeah.
Puts it right in. And,
Yeah.
you were just like, what the...
Well, it was
no discussion.
Yeah, but, this is just things we do to have a good time. I mean, at the time I was a little upset because I think that it was really dumb because I was like, well, now my fucked up bleach spiked hair, I have to cut the chunk out of it. It should be like, thank you. Take that discharge, here I am. But I think at the time I felt invaded in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't enjoy it, but I know the guy, I think it was when we were in the vat, sleeping in the vats in San Francisco with the MDC guys. I think it was Ron from MDC who had scissors and cut the gum out of my hair.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Little known punk fact. So if you need gum cut out of your hair and you like Millions of Dead Cops.
Was that before that was right around the time I went on the roof and tried to take a shower?
I wasn't paying attention while I had gum.
Fascinating. Oh, that was also the fight over a loaf of bread scene.
Yeah. Always the food.
I just want to add one other thing about this book in particular, and most of the punk books of the time that I made. The Black Flag book, the Fugazi book, a little less so, but even so much. Like when I made all these photos, there was no place for people to see them. There was some fanzines which had a couple thousand, a couple hundred people looking at them. You know, or you would hope that maybe one of the bands would use it in their record cover, on the record sleeve, or in the, you know, in the packaging. There were no even CDs yet. It was just the record, and that was it. But there were no magazines. Obviously, there was no internet, no Instagram, no Facebook, none of that, nothing. So I made these photos hoping one day that they would, at that time, inspire people somehow, because they were inspired, because the band was inspiring me. And you know, as the years went on, I'm making these other books, and I had this idea to do this book and the Black Flag book, and Johnny, as my current publisher, I used to publish all by myself, but Akashic thought it'd be a good idea to maybe do the Black Flag book, then to maybe do the Minor Threat book, and maybe do another one, because it's just nice for me to see, for everyone to see anything that's half decent, because these bands were so great, and there was no fucking place to share them back then. I mean, if you could imagine, you know, this photo of Ian was in a couple fanzines, and Cynthia Conley made a book, and you know, the cover shot is one of my favorite photos I've ever made, and it was in my book Fuck You Heroes. But even the Salad Day shot, it was on the record cover, but it was never anywhere else until we started making these books.
Well, to be fair, we sold a few of those records.
That is true, but relatively,
Thank you for your help.
relatively.
I know
Right?
what you mean. And there was no outlet for it, and it's. But that's, you know, I mean, the fanzine. Think of, even though the numbers were low, the connection was so high when you would see photographs of yours and other people in especially the ones the fanzines that made it across the country to us. Like, you know, what we would, our version of Rolling Stone would be like Flipside. And
Flipside or Maxim Rock and Roll. But even then, how many pictures of Minor Threat in there? Not very many.
Well,
Really?
I don't know. I never counted.
Not many.
I never counted.
Yeah, anyways.
No, I mean, it was too bad too, because we were, you know, well, I remember being sort of like, yeah, Glenn takes our photographs.
Mhm.
You know, you guys have these other people who show up, but Glenn comes to take our photographs, and it was a little bit annoying, because I was the ones I saw, I remember being so proud of, because I thought they looked so good. And going back to your question about the port shot, I mean, that was later, obviously, but there was a classic nature to the photographs. It was like, to me, it was the photographs that I had looked at in Rolling Stone and seen of Led Zeppelin, of AC/DC, and then you were taking these pictures of us, and I thought, wow, this is as good as it gets, you know.
Thank you.
And so it was gratifying later on to see these photographs start showing up all over the place and people identify. And then I know people who know the shot, the port shot, and don't think have ever heard a single song, but they know what it is.
Yeah, sure.
All right, on that note, let's open it up to all of you, if any of you have some good questions for these fellows. Yes, sir.
Hey, how's it going? This is Samir. Quick question. Did you guys play your last show with Trouble Funk? And how was that experience? Because that crowd must have been interesting.
My recollection of that show, I don't think we played very well, and I think, I mean, you have to, maybe you can correct me, because my memory is really bad on a lot of this stuff, I found, unfortunately, over the years. But I kind of remember it being us playing to kind of our people, and it not being super packed. And when we were done and it was going to switch over to Trouble Funk, I think that it was that then the place got completely packed and full of people who wanted to see Trouble Funk. I think we were kind of I don't think we were thinking of it as our last show. I mean, it certainly wasn't. It was just, happened to be a show that we played that wound up being the last show. But I don't think it was a great show. I don't think it sounded very good, and I think it was pretty sparse. Our attendance was pretty sparse.
Beautiful flyer, though.
It's sort of not true. That was the one time I
were
saw
there?
Minor Threat, and my memory is just this vast sea of people. I do remember that. I mean, in a weird way, Trouble Funk had a more integrated audience than you guys did. When you guys were playing, it was mostly white people. Then when Trouble Funk played, it was white people and black people.
Yeah.
And so, but I was, that was a massive audience. Definitely wasn't, sparse is not the right word for
I
that
don't know
show.
why I'm thinking of it that way. It just seemed like those Wilson Center, there's so many more DC shows that I think of as being packed. and this one didn't. But also the space was so big. Maybe
Yeah.
I was seeing it that way because it certainly wasn't full all the way back.
It was
This
a
was
huge space.
this was a defunct department store. This
Yeah.
was like the ground floor where you come in
Yeah.
to like a, I mean, it was a
To a
huge
1950s,
space.
60s department store.
So maybe
I mean, I
that's
think the other thing, well, at least personally, I didn't think it was our last show. I had no idea, but I knew that it wasn't going very well. Like we were not getting along, and the future was not looking bright. But I was so excited to play with Trouble Funk, and of course the big boys played, and I loved those guys. I remember it not being the best sounding thing at all. And then I have a recollection that no one else has, and either I made it up or they left, and I think they left. But after Trouble Funk played for like an hour and a half nonstop. I mean, it was just, and they were when they were done, Howard University Radio wanted to do a sort of a live call-in thing, and so they said, well, who from Minor Threat wants to do it? And you guys were just gone. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. So for an hour afterwards, I was on the Howard University Radio with a couple of guys from Trouble Funk, and I didn't even know who these guys were. I mean, we were just all like talking about music and stuff, and I told that to Edie, and it's like, you're crazy. That never happened. I said, yes, it did. You were gone.
I was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I left after we played.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
I mean, because we, like I say, we were, it was not good times. We were definitely raging against each other to some extent, and I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me. We were talking earlier about like shows, and I was notoriously hard on not just more myself all the time than the band, but like no show was good for me. Like I could find fault with any of it. I never had a good time. I mean, there were moments where I was really exhilarated, but I didn't really have like much of a good time. Glenn captures that great picture of me in the book, just basically, I'm yelling at somebody. It could be a sound person, it could be Brian. It probably was Brian. Or it's probably just, incredulous that something is happening that I can't control. I wanted to control everything. The reason why I stood on that side of the stage, by the way, people ask me this all the time, was because I could look at all the rest of them without switching. I could just lean over and stare them down because they were all over here. And that's why I stood there. And so when people say, was that a good show? I don't know. It was a show, and I think it had its moments like all of them did. But I never really felt totally satisfied with what we did.
You are tough to please.
Oh, really bad.
And he's a
In
lawyer
many,
now.
many ways.
Brian, I know for a time you played guitar alongside Lyle.
Yeah.
Did you guys feel there's any kind of competitive spirit between you two?
I mean, I don't know. I think that
You want me to answer this?
yeah. Yeah, I
You
do.
have to understand, Brian was and is so much better than me on
different.
in every conceivable way that I didn't feel in competition with him at all because I couldn't be in competition with him. What I knew how to do was my thing, and if anything, I tried to bend Brian's playing to my will. Like I tried to make him play like me, which is silly.
It was also impossible because Lyle is why he's so great is this insane, unique, self-taught thing that he did. So, I appreciate it. It's very gracious of you, but I mean, I was just trying. I was so happy to be playing the instrument that I was the most in love with, and trying to find a way to not play the same thing Lyle was playing. That was the whole point. Like a lot of bands had gone to two guitars, and we'd go see them, and the two guys were just playing the same thing. And I wasn't musically aware or developed enough to really understand harmony and interplay. That was all. I mean, I was still just learning, but I knew that if I was playing something different than him and it didn't rub, that was good.
Well, Brian sells himself short though on that because his sense of harmony. I mean, Brian's one of these people who, and I've known a few of them. And
Look, this is Glenn's book. We don't
probably
need-
Brian probably knows
This is
more.
fascinating. I love hearing this.
But there's an innate thing, and that's Glenn too. I can work Glenn. I'm good at this. I can work Glenn into this. Glenn has this innate, thing that you can't. You can practice it. You can learn, and you'll never capture. What Brian had was Brian could hear something and didn't just play it, right? I would hear something and go, oh, there's the note, and find it. And the reason I know this is because when we first started playing, Ian had written this song called Small Man, Big Mouth. But it didn't sound very good, and we couldn't figure out why. The chords were wrong. And Brian didn't say anything for the longest time, and we kept jamming this thing, and it wasn't right. And quietly, Brian just says, you know, if you just move those two chords up 1/2 step, it'll sound right. And then, that's it. It's
I
done.
don't know how I knew that though.
Innate.
Yeah. Well, that's what he gets for writing songs about me.
Weren't you a guitar prodigy? I had heard that many times before.
I peaked at like 10. I mean, I'm still right where I was. But I don't know. I mean, I
mean, for people who don't know that, I heard before I even met you that you actually played on stage with Santana when you were like 12 years old or something.
I played guitar on stage with Santana. The first concert that I went to, I played, and it was a Santana concert at Cobo Hall in Detroit. But I don't know if that makes me a prodigy.
How old were you?
12.
Okay.
So by
It
the
was
way,
about who knew who. It really wasn't about. It was a merit base.
in Brian's mom's house, there was a picture of Brian on stage at the Santana show. So it was hard for me to get away from this concept, you know. It wasn't like
I'm
this was
comfortable with it
hidden.
now. It's fine now.
Totally fine now. I'm comfortable.
Everything worked out. I do play guitar for a living now.
Yes.
I'm comfortable with it, but yeah, I just got into it really early, and I think I got good really quickly because it was just I was an only child. It was just all I did. So I was just lucky. It was just one of those things that just my parents had good records and left me alone.
All right, I think we have time for one, maybe two questions.
I'm interested in, we kind of touched on the artistic conflicts and not the personality conflicts. Because I've heard that like there was a lot of disagreement. You re-recorded out of step. The 5-piece lineup didn't last. And I heard that the band broke up because you guys were bringing in material. How did it work out?
I mean, that's a pretty good, overview of it. It's, I think we just, there was just a disconnect. I think that, as I found, historically we had this Minor Threat that was kind of this happy accident. It was just a nice combination of things that all sort of conspired to become this thing. And I think that Lyle and I were guilty of not really understanding how special that was. It was just like, we're in this great band, but have you guys heard U2? Because they're good too. And wouldn't it be fun to go play in like Ireland? We had this idea that we could just make this Minor Threat thing just move in a direction. And we didn't understand that wasn't the point of it. And Ian did. And so Lyle and I started to write music that was just not appropriate for this particular platform for many reasons. And Ian, being very wise, just let it, he just didn't participate. It was a lot of Minor Threat decisions to this day are made with the Quaker method, which is that, there's not really a tiebreaker. So it's just, if we just don't want to do something, we just kind of stop talking about it. We just walk away. That's one movie we weren't in. Oh well, And then Ian just looked at that. I think he just sort of distanced himself from what we were doing because it wasn't. He knew, And it's in retrospect, of course, that was the right thing to do. And I think part of the reason, at least why the legacy of the band is so strong, is we weren't around long enough to fuck it up.
Right.
There's no crossover record.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I think Brian's absolutely right, and I think that what he was, if I could elaborate a little bit on this notion of, Ian had this, again, innate idea of what it was, right? We thought it was a band.
Yeah.
We wanted to be in a band, and this was a good band. We had a good drummer, we were really tight. We could play. And we thought, we can expand, and this is a vehicle, and we can do things. And Ian rightly saw it as a moment in time, as a thing that belonged in this moment, and it was going to work here, and it wasn't going to be movable.
I also like to add that he was building a community. He was building a record label. He was it was much bigger than just the one band for him. And we just didn't, this is why he's such a great man. He had this vision, and we just didn't really, I didn't understand that until I was much, much older, that it wasn't just, it was a very unselfish act.
Yep.
Of his to be this way. It wasn't about like this is too precious or whatever. It's just he was thinking about a bigger picture and having a bigger impact. And I think we can look at the Discord catalog alone and see the benefit of all.
Yes, and also just so you know, I mean, Ian doesn't take the attitude, or at least he hasn't with me, that like, oh well, I didn't like what you were doing. His thing was, I can't go there with you. That's not my thing. I can't go to your place. So Brian and I were the two who were thinking we could take this thing to another place. Not a better place, but a different place. And Ian rightly understood that it wasn't going to move. It was going to stay there. And it was us who had to move. And we did.
Quick final question, because we're out of time, but since we're talking about Ian, Glenn, Ian has been a sounding board for you with some of your books, including this one. How does that play out? Why do you turn to him for feedback and guidance?
Ian has been a sounding board, I think, on every single one of my books. Every one. He has helped me because he's my best friend, and I ask him about everything. He's just that guy. He gives you great advice. Always. There's something about that guy. He's a very special human being. He's an incredible friend, and the way he looks at things, like these guys are describing to you, is he's just got a different way, a very unselfish way, but a very caring way of, helping you move forward, doing what you do, and before I met him, again, he knew my work, so it wasn't like I was coming there a baby, unformed. He knew how to work with that and with my attitude, and we all laugh at each other because we all have these idiosyncrasies that Ian recognizes, that we recognize amongst ourselves, that everyone's a goofball at one time or another. But as your friends, you all recognize that about each other. Ian, with making these books, honestly, all my books, I try and have a little double entendre, have it relate to, visual stuff. In My Eyes, 25 years, the Idealist book, What I See, the Black Flag book, the Fugazi book is Keep Your Eyes Open. I was going to call this Seeing Red, hence the red cover. But Ian says, why don't you just call it Just a Minor Threat? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's a great title. Like, I can't take that from you. That's too good of a title. Because I know that these guys are working on something themselves. Maybe one day the world will see. And I think that, I just thought, he gave me that title, and how could I not take it, even though it didn't work in the theme of everything else I was doing. And he's, and I don't agree with his eye always. We have different aesthetic on a lot of things, for sure. A lot of his stuff I don't agree with. He's much more easygoing aesthetically than I am with stuff. But he's so, he's like, there's some kind of weird maturity. I don't know what it is. It's a combination of a lot of things that just makes him, maybe these guys know because they grew up with him before I did. But yeah, there's just something special that helps you get there.
I think Seeing Red's a pretty good title for that book.
Yeah, thank you.
Now that I think about it.
Just a minor threat work, because then I didn't have to repeat the title on the cover on top of it.
Look, I'm not in business here.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm happy that you like that, though. At least I know I wouldn't have gone back. I just want to thank a couple people who are in the room, too. I want to thank Astrida Valigorsky, who helped me with a lot of the scans on this book that helped make this stuff possible. I want to thank Jamie again, who's in the back from the mob, who wrote his essay. If you haven't read the essays, Guy Pachotto's was a last-minute thought. He was going to help me. We were trying to figure out, Ian Savonius' essay is incredible, but I was just trying to get around it. There was something about it that I wanted to make work, and Guy and I started talking, and then I said, why don't you just write something? And he did in like 24 hours, and it's amazing. It's the best essay. It's the front essay in the book.
It's my
He's
favorite.
in the room.
It's my favorite in the book.
And Ian Savonius isn't here, but he wrote his thing. And Zach De La Rocha, who was hoping to be here, but isn't here, he wrote also an amazing essay, which I'm just so proud of having it in this book with these guys, to give them and to honor them the way they deserve to be honored. And not to mention the other guys, Biafra wrote something that's pretty funny. And Alec Mackay also, just, what you know, he could really write. It's amazing. And thank everyone for coming, and I'm happy that you all like the book.
Let's hear a real loud round of applause for these guys. All right, and how will this book signing
Yes,
work?
so guys, the best way for this to work, I hate to send people into the cold, but just so we can move the chairs and set everything up for the signing, I'm going to kindly ask anyone who's going to get a book signed just to step outside. We'll bring you back in as soon as we clear these chairs and line everyone up and get
Which is
anything
awesome,
signed.
because I have to pay.